When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, orderly. User, Wawa67D. Posted, October 14th, 1997.
I was never much for religion. Didn't grow up with it and didn't look for it later. Only time I stepped foot in church was when somebody died or got hitched, and even then I kept to the back row. I always figured when the end came, it came. No point dressing it up with robes or organ music, but that was before I worked nights at Fairlawn Hospice, because I saw something there I still don't know how to name. Fairlawn was one of those half-forgotten places tucked behind the main drag of a steel town in western Pennsylvania. Clean enough, quiet enough. Fluorescents buzzing overhead, the scent of lemon polish always trying and failing to mask the underlying smell of piss and bleach. I worked mostly the overnight shift. They called me an orderly, but I was just the guy who wheeled folks in, helped them piss in a pan, and kept him company when nobody else would. A lot of people don't realize how many folks die alone. Happens more than you think. People grow old, grow bitter, outlive their people, or scare them off. Either way, the end still comes, and someone's gotta be there when it does. That someone was usually me. I was 27 back when I saw it. First time, anyway. Back then, I was a couple of years sober and still holding on tight most days, trying to stay clean, trying to stay quiet. Fairlawn gave me structure, something to hold on to. Nights were long but simple. I liked that. The quiet helped. There was this one guy, Mr. Godek, a coal miner, lungs like shredded curtains, meaner than a hornet. Nobody came to visit him. Didn't seem like he wanted him to. Spent his last weeks yelling at nurses and refusing morphine. That last night, I checked on him just after midnight. He was barely hanging on, skin yellow, breathing shallow. I made a note, turned off the radio in his room, and moved on. When I came back around 2:30, the room was dark except for the hallway light leaking across the tile, and the radio I'd shut off was playing again. Old WJAS, crooning out a fuzzy Sinatra tune. At first, I thought maybe he'd turned it back on somehow, but then I saw him. There was a man sitting beside Mr. Godek's bed. Not a nurse, not family. No one had signed in. No footsteps in the hall. He was just there, tall, thin, dressed in what looked like an old-style coat, like something out of a black and white western. His hands were folded in his lap, fingers too long and too still. He didn't look at me, just stared at Godek, quiet as death himself. And that's when I felt it. Not fear exactly, not even cold. It was more like pressure, like the air in the room had thickened somehow. My ears popped, my heart slowed. Something inside me understood what my brain hadn't caught up to yet. This wasn't right. This wasn't human. Then Godek gasped. One hard breath, his last. The monitors didn't even beep. They'd already been turned off per the no-code order. I stepped forward, eyes flickering from him to the man in the chair, but the chair was empty. No sound, no movement, just an indentation in the cushion like someone had been sitting there for a long time. Next morning, I asked the nurse on duty if anyone had visited. She laughed. Said I must have been dreaming. I didn't argue. Didn't tell anyone what I saw. Folks in healthcare don't last long if people think they're seeing ghosts, but that was not the last time. Every so often, maybe once or twice a year, I'd walk into a room and feel that same pressure, that same stillness that wasn't just quiet, but wrong. It never looked like the same man twice, no. Sometimes a bald guy in a raincoat, sometimes a pale woman with her hands folded just so. Always dressed strange, though, always still and always there a moment before death. Once, I got a glimpse of a man in room 8 with a little girl who'd been in a coma for weeks. He sat cross-legged on the windowsill, just staring down at her. I blinked, and he was gone. Another time, a woman in 3B was moments from passing, and I swear there was someone standing behind the curtain near the sink, just a dark outline that shouldn't have been there. The moment she passed, the shadow lifted, and the room felt lighter, like something had been waiting and then left. I started calling them the attendants. Not angels, not demons. Just something that came near the end. Not to hurt, not to help, just to be there. The last time was different, though. There was this old Sunday school teacher, Irene Dobbins, a sweet lady, late-stage dementia, mostly out of it. She'd hum hymns sometimes. Blessed Assurance was her favorite. I liked her. She'd hold your hand and call you sugar no matter who you were. Her daughter had stopped coming months earlier, said it was too hard, so I made a habit of sitting with Irene when I could, just so she wasn't alone. That night, I knew something was off before I even stepped into the room. The hallway was warm, but her door felt cold to the touch. The lights were dimmer than I remembered, and the air felt heavy, thick enough to chew. He was there. Same one from Godek's room, I swear to you. Same coat, same hands, same too perfect face, but this time he turned and looked at me. His eyes didn't blink, didn't even seem to move, but I knew they were fixed on me. His face was symmetrical. That's the only word I got for it. Not handsome, not ugly, just perfectly shaped in a way that didn't make sense. It was like looking at something drawn, not born. And then he smiled. That was the worst part of it. It wasn't a cruel smile. It wasn't kind either. It was just certain. The kind of smile someone has when they already know how the story ends. I wanted to move. I wanted to speak. I couldn't do either. Just stood there as Irene gave one final, peaceful sigh and was gone. And then he was gone too. No sound, no motion, just the faint scent of dust and iron hanging in the air. I left the job not long after that and moved to Ohio. Started managing a hardware store. It's quieter in different ways, but definitely less death. Yet sometimes I think about those nights, about the attendance.
Subject: The Killer Killer. User: Santa Sniper. Posted December 25th, 1998.
What movies like Seven get wrong about serial killers is that, by and large, they're not calculating super geniuses enacting some master plan. What they are gross little opportunistic dorks, freaks of the human psyche. We blow them up into something larger than life because they scare us, and who wants to believe that the boogeyman hiding in their closet is really just some sweaty palm jerk-off who gets a stiffy when he thinks about his mom? How do I know this? I've met dozens of serial killers, 12 every year for the last 10 years, at least the ones I've known about. To a man, and all of them have been men so far, they're sad, stinky, graceless losers who've bought their own hype and become convinced they were untouchable. When I finally end their miserable lives, the look of complete and total surprise on their faces is almost reward enough for me to keep doing this work without getting paid. Almost. Even if a killer of killers has to buy groceries. Exactly how I became a killer is a story for another time. All you need to know is that every winter, my doorbell rings. When I open up, there's always a single 3-foot by 3-foot cardboard box wrapped in green and white paper with a red bow on top. I'm a sucker for Christmas, so even though it's only me here in the house, I put up a tree. Really go for it. Garland, tinsel, ornaments, the whole bit. I bring that box inside and, same as I have since the first time, open it up on the floor of my living room in the glow of my little holiday sanctuary. Inside, there are always 12 fat manila envelopes, a handwritten note, and $500,000 in shrink-wrapped bundles of cash, tens, 50s, and hundreds. The bundles are unmarked and non-sequential, not that I worry about this being a sting. 10 years is a long time to set a snare. The envelopes are stamped with months, December through to November, and the note says, without fail, Merry Christmas and Happy Hunting. SC. Ho, ho, ho. Am I really being paid by Santa Claus to hunt down murderous scumbags? It's a nice thought. Who wouldn't want to be one of Santa's elves? The answer is, I don't have any idea. But whether it's Santa Claus, Sean Connery, or Sheryl Crow, they must have one hell of an intelligence apparatus, and each stamped envelope is detailed information on a different active serial killer operating across the continental USA. Either Alaska and Hawaii haven't had serial killers in the last 10 years, or there's someone else doing the job who specializes in those areas. God bless them if they are. I hate the cold and pineapples. I used to open all the envelopes at once, like a little kid. Now that I'm a little older and wiser, I treat them like a year-long advent calendar and only let myself open the first one. This year, I unlooped the December envelope string and pulled out a sheaf of papers, photographs, police reports, detailed notes about my killer of the month. This one was a real putz. Lawrence Yost, a bully and killer of women who had started his career by knocking out an old man in a grocery store. Despite being charged with second-degree assault, he hadn't been charged. How the hell had that happened? I turned the page and found my answer. He had a googie. Of course he did. The lamest ones always have a googie. Let me explain. When I was a kid, My best friend Lloyd had an imaginary friend named Googie. Lloyd swore up and down that Googie was real, a 4-foot-tall hairy man with sharp teeth who looked out for Lloyd when his human buddies weren't around, keeping him safe from his slap-happy piece of shit stepdad. It seemed to make him feel safe, so none of us opined on how weird it was for a 12-year-old boy to still have an imaginary friend. One hot summer night, someone broke into the house and slashed stepdad's throat with a ragged blade, taking a carton of smokes and a handle of Jimmy Beam with him on the way out. A couple weeks later, I saw Lloyd sitting out back of the motel where he and his mom had moved while the house was being cleaned up for sale. He was in a plastic lawn chair, talking amiably while the hairy little man sitting next to him puffed away on a cigarette. Googie wasn't imaginary after all. I never told anyone, of course, but it shifted my perspective on the world and made me realize it was a lot bigger than I ever suspected. After discovering that some of the serial killers in my envelopes had a Googie of their own, a being from another world enabling or encouraging them, I tracked down Lloyd. To my relief, he was living a full, happy life, free of violence, and I took from this that not all these beings were evil, which was encouraging. When you spend most of your time poking around in the world's dumpster, you start thinking everything is trash. Speaking of trash, Lawrence Yost Googie was the lowest kind, a non-physical influence centered around a single area of power. In this case, a quarry in the Midwest. I dropped the envelope on my floor in annoyance. I was going to get cold after all. 24 hours later, I was on a flight.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.